present. Whistleblowers need the press for disclosures to reach a wide audience. The press relies on whistleblowers to report on issues that the state seeks to hide. Meanwhile, the government insists that all of these are unauthorized disclosures, prosecuting whistleblowers and, in recent years, increasingly intimidating journalists and news organizations. Ed, did you wake up one morning and decide you were going to be a whistleblower?
I don't think it was quite that dramatic. It was, it's a long process. People like to imagine there's a Rubicon moment. It's really more of a slow burn. Because if you are coming forward as a whistleblower and going, the public needs to know, and once they know, everything will be better. Unicorns and rainbows and sunshine from here on out. You're on the weirder side of that weirdo spectrum, right? That's unfortunately just not how the world works. That's not how politics work. That's not how people work, right? What I think is proper and appropriate to be upset about, to be concerned about, to think is a thing of real public concern, is the legacy of impunity that these disclosures, in many cases, produce. The customer of all of these executive spy agencies, the CIA, the NSA, is not the public. They don't say we serve the public. They say we serve the president. They say we serve the executive branch. We inform executive decision makers so they can provide or sort of carry out the best quality decisions. Ask yourself if you think the current White House is making the best quality decisions no matter what information is available to them. But that's the basic premise of it. So here's the thing. If governments, and I think all governments are likely to do this, continue to break the rules, if they continue to act toward their political self-interest at the expense of the public interest, or there's even a perception that they will, because the appearance is as important as the reality when it comes to human behavior, that people are going to continue to come forward. And when they become convinced that they will be found, they start to think, maybe it's better not to be discriminating in what I reveal, because I'll only get one shot at this ever. I will never get another chance to pick up a phone, call the journalist, and provide sort of more context. I'll never get a chance to respond to a follow-up question. And after I come forward, the government's going to crack down on everybody in my unit. They're going to sort of close the gates.
Very much for coming out. We have only about 15 minutes or so. We hope that you have some questions, and we'd be glad to answer some of them. Does anyone have any questions?
My name's Mike Wendell, and I had a similar circumstance happen to me. I'm a whistleblower, and I had documents, and I have a half a dozen confidential informants. The name of the town is Ellenville, New York, and I've been trying to get my information in front of the Attorney General, Mr. Eric Schneiderman, for 5 years. Is there any way you would look at the environmental injustice in Ellenville?
I've spoken to folks in our office.
Many times, and I've sued New York State. You've thrown my case out. Would you look at Ellenville?
We have looked and we are looking.
And you'll work with Mr. John Faso, Congressman Faso.
I appreciate if you ask the questions that relates to the filmmakers and not to try to distract.
I will.
Okay, it is.
So what you should do is call here.
Well,
call Kingston, right there.
yes.
Okay? And
Well, my biggest concerns are the health and safety, welfare of the constituents.
absolutely. So what is the pollution?
The pollution is radioactive materials, tritium, strontium.
From where? What's the source of that?
The channel masters that
The
originated in
former
Ellenville.
TV firm.
It was former military.
Yeah.
It was legacy waste.
Has any
from the DSM. The DSM is,
has DEC or any agency like that ever
they're all aware of it.
quantified this?
They're all aware of it.
Okay.
It's a long, long story, but it's legacy waste from 1939.
Chris Gibson had a file on this. Let me. I will ask with that information. I'll ask the staff to tell me to look into this thing. Especially, I want to see if there's a DEC component here.
There is.
Okay.
I promise.
And all right.
Thank you very much. And
Okay.
hopefully we can bring a lot of this stuff to the surface.
Good. All
And
right.
I'd like to be on par with you and help the people.
Well, I certainly want to find out. These things are hard. You got to have a regulatory agency that has gotten involved.
Well, it's the Department of Energy. They have all the materials that we seek. Chris tried to get to the Department of Energy and get these certain items from them,
Yeah.
and they just passed the buck.
All right. Let me see what I can do.
But I would like to work with you. I might have misjudged you before, and I apologize if I did.
I don't know why you would have done that.
Because I was assuming Chris Gibson would have had the same, he would have clued you in on all this stuff.
Well, we had a lot of things that that he was working on, that we worked on. Some of our staff is the same. So
Right.
I think the staff will be able to tell me how far Chris got, and I'll see if I can pick it up from there.
George Christian, I think his
George
name is.
Christian.
He knows all about it.
All right.
We're going to do a disease registry. 2 years ago, I tried to get it for Chris Gibson. He said if I got the disease registry, he would take it to Washington.
Those are hard to do.
He
I got to
needed the
run because
media.
I'm doing my
I know
town
it.
hall.
I know it.
All right.
I
Good.
look forward
All
to
right.
seeing you again
Be
in the
back.
future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
And the intelligence services said, no, not this person, they know too much.
December 22nd, 2016, at 3:30. I'm here with Michael Wendell, and I'm under Sheriff Freer conducting an internal investigation. I was remiss in stating for the record that there's another person in the room with us who's videotaping this
film
conversation. So
documentary.
that's all. I just forgot to put that on the record. We're just here to gather the facts so I can do my investigation.
The whole thing comes down to the New York City aqueduct being cross-contaminated.
What's it contaminated with?
Trichloroethylene, benzene.
Trichloroethylene and benzene. And where'd that come from?
It came from a place called Channel Masters.
Out of the big plant down there
That they're-
in Ellenville.
That is correct.
Village Ellenville, yeah.
Right here is evidence that 9,100 gallons per minute comes into the New York City aqueduct.
Mhm.
This is the New York City aqueduct. And if you want to read with me, what does that say?
It says water inflow in gallons per minute.
And how many gallons per minute is it right here?
9,100.
And that groundwater contaminated flowing into the New York City aqueduct after every severe rain event. This is what the whole
Yeah, but it can't get into the aqueduct here. It's got to
the
go into the
aqueduct
reservoir
is
first.
cracked 500 feet
I know it's
in
leaking.
Lime Rock. When they turn the water off here because of flooding events, all of the tritium, strontium-90, and uranium goes into the New York City aqueduct.
You know, there's 8 million people down in, over 8 million, 8.5 million, I think now, New York City people. Why don't you go get on one of these investigative reporters, was it CBS or NBC? They have these investigative reporters. They put that on the air, and if 8 million people read that their water's no good, I think they'd be upset.
By having a source partner with journalists, even an extraordinarily large volume of an extraordinarily sensitive amount of material could be provided. The public could learn from it, and that we could mitigate not just real harms, right, but theoretical potential harms. And whenever you see the next leak come, and surely it will, and sooner than we think, hopefully larger than we expect.
Looks like it has been removed. And so, okay.
It's possible we have toxic waste underneath that concrete slab that we're very worried about, the levee breaching and getting to that toxic material.
Yeah, and I think Alan Springett wanted me to also talk to you, I think, about that, if there was any concern.
Oh, there's a lot of concern. It's taken 3 years and no trucks have ever left the site. Looks like once again proud to be an American. And here we are at the former site of the Channel Masters. And what do we see out there? Could that be a drill rig taking core samples into a concrete slab? I sure hope so. It's about time. DEC is going to be out here on top of this levee that's being hurriedly put back into place. It's gone on for 3 years. Everybody in town's aware of it, and there could be legacy radioactive wastes buried underneath the building. The slab, which will remain. That's why we're a little worried about levees breaking.
Yeah, and so I want to, we'll look at this area. After this, I'd like to swing by and see what's going on there because I guess could you elaborate maybe a little bit on what's...
Well, half of it's already been demolished, the other half will be short.
Okay.
So there, the foundation will be the building will be demolished.
Okay. Is there any data that we don't have that you could give to us?
We are sure that there's methyl chloride, there's benzene, and there's trichloroethylene of 980,000 parts per billion underneath that slab. Mm-hmm. And so if that levee breaks, people die around here. That's why it's kind of a touchy point with the community.
I appreciate that.
What's the title of the purple and the blue legend?
It is breach analysis, 1% annual chance.
What's the purple one?
Oh, I'm sorry, you asked the green. The green is the National Valley.
Okay.
So
That's the one that would kill everybody, the purple one.
the purple one is if the levee breached.
It's going to allow the water to keep rolling here and not back up and flood us out. And that's kind of part of the point.
Do you have a contact at the Corps that we can get in touch with?
I have that stuff.
You have that stuff? Oh, so Al, you know what's happening?
I know exactly what.
Okay.
It wasn't briefed to the Congress. Our representatives didn't hear about it in the way that they're supposed to. Instead, only a very select group of what's called the Gang of Eight heard about it. These are the most senior members of the House and the Senate. One from both the Democrat Party, the Republican Party, and the one from each of the intelligence committees of both of those groups in Congress. So they're substituting the judgment of 8 people for the public's representatives, which are 535 people. And they only brief it out years later, bits by bit after this, and they don't tell them the whole story. They lie about it. The whole thing is just it's a crisis of democracy.
Condition. So that's just something that I'm saying it to you so you know we're in the middle of doing that, trying to do it. Yeah. So.
Well, I guess.
And that was getting back to the map change. That map change affected a substantial amount of homes in that community several years ago, and that was if you look at the firm map.
The thing is that the firm map doesn't show any of this.
Well, he's talking about south.
South? Oh, on the
Yeah.
south
Yeah,
side
he's talking
here?
about the Ellen
This part right
Yeah.
here, yeah. So there is, we'd have to go back, so there are these.
And they weren't there
Right
before
here.
a 2009 meeting, just so you know.
But like I said, that meeting was for the purposes
Yeah.
of engaging the community prior
I
to
know
the
it's
map
different,
change.
but it feels the same. I'm just
Oh,
kidding.
I appreciate that because we're talking about the same kind of thing.
Whistleblowing is not something that needs to be disincentivized anymore. The deck is already stacked against them. But when these exceptional sort of events occur, how does anybody hear about it? And it doesn't happen without journalists. It does actually fear of the infrastructures that we are supposed to be overseeing, the public through our representatives, and our representatives themselves are afraid of what's going on.
Is there any way we could talk about the 55 houses over in the DEP designated area?
Talking about healthcare here today.
Oh, I know it, but a lot of lives are at stake. Can we talk about the 55 contaminated houses that are in the DEP cancer cluster, Judge?
No, we can't. Thank you very much.
How about a later date, Judge Parker?
So, we're gonna head out. Yeah, so.
At least 300 emails. It's all about his complicity with Bill S6276.
Great.
I know you're not complicit. You're not going to go to jail, Kevin, I promise.
I'll be right back.
You did what you had to do.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm talking about the radioactive materials in the water, Kevin.
This is a time to speak up. It doesn't mean you're hating on the other side. It doesn't mean you're not willing to work with people who are willing to work with you. Try and listen to everyone, but insist that they listen to you. And if you treat people with respect, you have the right to insist that you be respected. But this is about our duty and our civic obligation to push forward towards greater justice and equality.
Would you look at Ellenville?
We have looked and we are looking.
We can do it. Now is our time to rise. The question is simple. Will we rise to the occasion?
We will rise.
We will rise. Thank you very much.
Amen. Maybe I'll be able to become controller someday. Very nice speech.
New York City also has a potentially devastating problem with its drinking water infrastructure. America's largest metropolis consumes 1.2 billion gallons of water a day. That water comes to New York by way of a system of aqueducts that carry it from lakes and rivers more than 100 miles away. The aqueducts are mostly underground, and one of them, the 85-mile-long Delaware Aqueduct, is the longest continuous tunnel in the world. It's 13.5 feet in diameter, between 300 and 1,500 feet in the ground, and 70 years old.
You have maybe the best water supply system for any city anywhere on the planet. It's not pumped, it just flows naturally by gravity from its origins under the Hudson River south into the city of New York. But eventually it's going to begin to decline and begin even to fall apart.
The Delaware Aqueduct is leaking massively. Every day, the giant pipeline pours between 10 and 36 million gallons of water into the earth around it, mostly through a pair of cracks that have developed in a geologically stressed section of the tunnel.
The pipe has eroded to a point where it can no longer support the movement of that water. There are communities that are around that pipe, and literally they're flooding from underneath.
The loss of those 36 million gallons is not regarded too seriously by the recipients of the water, by the government of New York City, because in the context of the huge water supply, it isn't that much. But the fact of the matter is that it's having a very negative effect on the lives of people living here in the community.
We know for certain that some water reaches the surface. How much of an impact that has on the individual properties, I mean, we're anxious to find that out.
Much of the leaking water appears to be bubbling to the surface in Wawarsing, New York, a small town 1.5 hours north of New York City. It has the bad luck to be situated just above one of the pipe's massive leaks. the water contaminants into the wells, creating the ultimate water nightmare. The Delaware Aqueduct was built in the 1930s and 40s and rushed into service during World War II, when high-grade materials were scarce. During construction, groundwater seeped so heavily into the section under Wawarsing that engineers had to line the aqueduct with steel and seal it with concrete.
The tunnel went through a limestone fault at that spot, and it's not surprising that now we're faced with leakage.
A full inspection of the tunnel is currently impossible. The Delaware Water Tunnel hasn't been shut down for inspection since 1957 because engineers fear it could collapse without the pressure of water surging through the system.
We have a situation in the town of Wawarsing in Ulster County where there are approximately 30 homes over the New York City aqueduct that is leaking badly. So what happens is the water is coming up under these people's homes, filling the basement. It's an emotional nightmare living like that. Now, New York City denies that the water coming up into their homes is a result of the leaking aqueduct. We know that it is.
And similar to yours. Some of your projects that are sitting at the table right now on the PAC committee are some of the most difficult projects that we're faced with throughout all of them. So we've been working through them with the engineers. One of the things, some of the things that I'm seeing in the field are especially the deeper drilled wells that we're seeing out there. They seem to be much more affected by contamination than some of the wells that are 20, 30, 40, 50 feet deep. What I'm hearing in the field from people is my wells are bad that are drilled deep into bedrock, and the ones that are just on the surface don't touch my water. It's nice and clean.
There's more money on the way for some residents living in the town of Wawarsing. The New York City Department of Environmental Protection announced this Friday more than $12 million have been earmarked to help those impacted by the leaking Delaware aqueduct. $7 million will go toward expanding the Napanook Water District to include 275 more homes. Another $5.5 million is being set aside to fix the homes of local residents damaged by years of flooding from an underground concrete tunnel which supplies roughly half of New York City's drinking water.
The money is going to help residents there. There are residents that were not eligible for any of the other buyout programs, and this money will help them, and for that we're grateful.
Residents already participating in the Ulster County Home Buyout Program